Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Hope everybody had a terrific weekend. It was a tremendous weekend of basketball, Sap. We had some really exciting games going on, so we'll just jump right into it. I'm not going to just delay talk about great basketball games. Did you enjoy watching over the weekend, Sap?
I really did. And I'm someone who values the regular season because I think that's the way the sport continues to grow. Look, the postseason is great for 2 months, but you need to have a regular season that means something. And this weekend, we saw four national TV games, two on Saturday, two on Sunday. Now, a lot of the stars were out, right? LeBron wasn't playing, AD wasn't playing for the Lakers, but they were able to win in overtime against the Jazz, who didn't have Rudy Gobert or Donovan Mitchell, but it was still an exciting game. And then Saturday night, I thought was the best game of the weekend, maybe one of the three or four best games of the year when the Celtics outlasted the Golden State Warriors. Jason Tatum and Steph Curry put on a clinic with Steph Curry, a work of art. So two really good games on Saturday. And on Sunday, we see a sneaky good game between the Knicks and the Pelicans. You get to see Julius Randle against Zion Williamson. They're kind of mirror images of each other. Zion's better, but, both lefties, both big, strong guys that look like they could also do well at the NFL scouting combine. And then you wrap up the weekend with a sneaky good game with the Heat beating the Brooklyn Nets. And again, no Jimmy Butler for Brooklyn, no James Harden for Brooklyn, no Jimmy Butler for Miami. And of course, KD got hurt once again early in the game. Yet Bam Adebayo wins the game on a buzzer beater. So you had four really good games. There's some playoff seedings involved there. But my bigger point on this is the sport needs to make sure that the regular season means something, especially next year, Jet, because right now we're seeing 12, 15, 20, 25% capacity at the stadiums as they're, trying to let some folks in during this pandemic. Well, next year, I'm sure they're going to hope to get to 50, 75%, well, maybe 100% in some locales. Let's make the games mean something so people are going to want to come back to the arenas and watch, because a family of four getting four tickets, buying popcorn, soda, hot dogs, parking cars, that's a $500 night, right? And so if a family shows up and they've laid out $500 and their little kids are fans of Kyrie Irving or whoever, and he's not playing, that devalues the product and it devalues the regular season. So I think that seeing these games that we saw this weekend, it was a good step for the NBA. I'm not trying to sound like, Commissioner Adam Silver here doing a sell job for the NBA, but those are important. And it's entertainment in the end, right? All of this is entertainment. And I think those four games were wildly entertaining, mostly, even more so, the Celtics Golden State game. That was just fantastic to watch.
Yeah, you saw really quality basketball, but kind of what you mentioned, you can't always count on getting high level games with the stars out. You kind of almost
Right.
got lucky in some circumstances, in that these games were all really competitive and fun to watch, and you were missing star players. Even the Celtics game, Warriors game, which I agree with you is one of the best games of the season. And that's not me just being a biased Celtics fan. It was just it was,
Oh,
I mean, there was no separation between the teams for the whole second half. It was just back and forth. Uh, but that's still, Jalen Brown didn't play in that game. Obviously, Klay Thompson's been out the whole season long. So, there were certainly marquee names missing in that one. We talked about this the other day, Sap. It's not good for the league to have star players missing out. And, you mentioned, for it's $500 for, family of four to go. And in some markets, it's even way more money than that, going to a
mhm.
game in LA or even here in Boston, it's extremely expensive. Those big markets, if you are taking your full family, you're paying quite the price tag. And like you mentioned, it is entertainment at the end of the day, Sap. And the best ability to be entertained is to see those star players, because they can do things that the typical average player isn't able to do. Kyrie Irving is a guy that can do amazing things on the court. He can dribble the ball the way nobody else can. Kevin Durant is a 7-footer who can shoot from all over the court. These are the main attractions, and the game is worse off, and the product's worse off when you don't have them. So obviously, just to echo what we said in the prior podcast, the league needs to figure out some sort of way to make sure these guys are available. And I know Kevin Durant left that game with an injury, so that doesn't really count. But the games where these guys are sitting out, that's That's obviously not what the league wants to see. I'm not saying everybody has to play every single game, but you'd like, especially these nationally televised games and these marquee matchups, you really want to make sure that your stars are playing in them. And the NBA was fortunate in that they had some of their stars shine on those national televised games this past weekend, but they were missing a good handful of them, Sap. And you can't count on the games being super high quality games every time the stars are out.
You never can, even if the stars are playing, you can have
That's true. That's
a
true.
dud. But if you're ESPN, ABC, and they all fall under the Disney umbrella, you're paying a ton of money for the rights to these games, and you don't want B-listers out there. I know if I lay out 150, $200 to go to a U2 concert, I want to see Bono and I want to see The Edge. I don't want to see understudies. Now, you don't get that in rock shows. They'll just cancel it, obviously. But even the same thing, if you're going to see Hamlet, I want to see Daniel Day-Lewis. I don't want to see some other actor. And look, if you're getting tickets for the Brooklyn Nets, you want to see Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, James Harden. Now, I totally get if injuries are real, absolutely make sure the guys are healthy and ready to play at their best as we get closer to the postseason. There's one way to mitigate it, or there's several ways to try to mitigate it, Jet, is first of all, maybe you tweak the schedule a little bit, whether it's a 72 game schedule or an 82 game schedule. They may have to go back to 82 games because you need the gate to keep increasing the money to pay the players. I get all that. But instead of playing 2 games against the other conference, maybe just have 1 game against the other conference. So the Lakers would come in to play the Celtics one year, and then the Celtics would go to LA the following year to play the Lakers. So you'd kind of limit travel a little bit. You'd play more games within your conference. And then if you're playing within your own division or with your own conference, play 2 games in the same city. We've seen some of that in the NHL this year, which I think is working pretty well, right? So, in fact, the Bruins are playing the Buffalo Sabres 3 games up in Buffalo over a 5-day period. Again, cuts down on travel and it cuts down on load management because the players will be ready, willing, and able to play more. And I'm not going to compare hockey players to basketball players. Hockey players tend to be insane and never want to sit out games. Basketball players do have load management, but you get my point. Let's say the Celtics and Knicks, they're playing 6 games in the regular season. We'll have a 2-game set in Boston on a Friday and a Sunday. And this way, the players will be better rested for those games. And then when you go to New York in a month, you do the same thing. That's just some ideas that they can do. Cut back on travel so that we get to see more of the great players.
Yeah, the way I've always thought that you try to counter the load management part of it as best you can is you got to convince the players to play at the end of the day. And the best way to me to do that is it's a financial thing. So we've talked about this before, that the all NBA teams
Mhm.
are tied into how much money a player can make, whether they can make a super max, a super max, or any sort of extra salary. That's tied into you making an all NBA team or an all defensive team, MVP, defensive player of the year, that sort of stuff. I would put it in the next CBA if possible, and negotiate it that you're only eligible to make one of those teams if you play, X amount of games or X
Right.
percentage of games in a season. And that way, it becomes a lot more difficult for a player to say, hey, I'm going to sit out this game tonight because I don't really feel like playing, when you might be on that threshold of not being able to make an all NBA team and then not being able to make money. Now, at the end of the day, that just affects, 15 players
Mhm.
who make the all NBA team, but there's a lot of players still vying for it. So, in that, within 15 players might be the final cut, but during a season, there's probably about 30 players who are vying for those 15 spots. And those are obviously the best players in the league.
Right.
So I think that's maybe a way to do it. The players union obviously would not be amenable to that, but it is a negotiation. And just because the players union doesn't like one thing, maybe the league gives back on another thing.
Mhm.
So that's how I always thought maybe the best way to combat it is you have to have some sort of financial incentive or disincentive uh, to make players play more. It it's just if the players can just do what they're doing now and have no financial repercussions, they're not giving back game checks, then they're just going to keep doing it the way they're doing it because, as you mentioned, I think the last time we talked, Sap, it works. So the teams and the coaches are incentivized to do it because resting and getting your players fully healthy for the playoffs gives you an increased chance to win the championship. But it does take a lot away from the regular season. And there's a lot more regular season games than there are postseason games, Sap. So you need to make sure that the product is just as entertaining, or at least close to as entertaining during the regular season.
The NFL is king because the regular season means so much. We watch every Sunday and Monday because those games matter. In the NBA, we had a great weekend with those 4 nationally televised games. Next weekend, that may not be the case, but they've got to rectify this to build the brand and not to lose fans, especially when they have the buildings going to 50, 75%, maybe 100% capacity next year. Because people may say, why am I going to lay out $500 or $700 to bring my family to go see the Brooklyn Nets, and Harden is wearing, some sort of tie-dye T-shirt, and Durant seems to get hurt every time he plays, and Kyrie's taking some time off for his birthday. It kind of devalues the regular season. That's a big reason I think a lot of people are rooting against the Brooklyn Nets, because they've assembled this uber team, but they've also, taken a lot of time off. Those 3 great players have only played 7 games together. Now, I'm a Laker guy, so you can maybe make the case that LeBron's load managing at this point, as is Anthony Davis. I don't know. I think LeBron wants to try to win an MVP, but maybe someone within the organization, maybe Jeannie Buss, the owner, who still signs the check, said, LeBron, take a little time off. We need you at your best. But let's not devalue the regular season as much as it has been devalued the last few years.
Yeah, I think that different players, obviously, their goals are different in the course of a season, and everybody wants to win a championship. LeBron certainly wants to win a championship, but I think, like you're saying, he came in the season wanting to win MVP, but I think once that race became further out of his control, with guys rising above him, and him would have a really hard time catching. It looked like Embiid for a while, and now Jokic, because of the games played. I think he became more comfortable with the idea of maybe taking an extended rest. So that may not have been his game plan coming into the year, but things change. With injuries or there's a million reasons things change from the beginning of the season towards the end of the season. And so players change, their plans change, coaches' plans change for their players. Players that you thought would play every game don't play a lot of games. Players that you thought won't play a lot of games end up playing a lot of games. It's unpredictable, and that's what makes the regular season could be potentially exciting. But you also want the predictability of having players. So you want the season to be unpredictable with rising and falling. You don't know who's going to finish it first, but you want the players to be consistently playing.
Absolutely.
So one of those games, Sap, that we were talking about was obviously just a tremendous game. We both agree one of the best games of the season was that Warriors Celtics game. The Celtics ultimately won that 119-114, extending their winning streak to 6 games. But the 2 stars in that game, who for the most part have been healthy this season. So it's hard to knock Tatum or Curry. Tatum, the only time he missed was with COVID, so you can't really fault him for that. That's not load management. That's a actual serious thing. And Curry's played a remarkable amount of games this year too, for somebody coming off an injury and who's had a lot of tread on the tires. So they both put on an absolute show. Curry finished with 47 points. Tatum finished with 44 points. It was just a back and forth duel between those 2 guys. Ultimately, the Celtics came out on top. We've been talking about Tatum the past week, Sap, how it looks like he's turned a corner here. He's clearly something has gotten in, either it was Kendrick Perkins or something has gotten to him, where he's playing at a completely different level than he had been basically for the entire regulation of the season up until this past week and a half.
I think the Perkins tweet had something to do with it, but I also think that during the homestand, a 7-game homestand where the Celtics went 4-3, Luka Doncic came in, outplayed him. The Mavericks won. Zion Williamson came in, outplayed Jason Tatum. The Pelicans won. Later in the homestand, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid beat Jason Tatum. Those 4 players are all his contemporaries, right? Brilliant young stars in the league, and Tatum's supposed to be the Celtics version of Luka or of Zion or of Embiid, like an MVP caliber player. And he was outplayed by those guys, and they lost those games. And I think that kind of got into his head, as if to say, well, if I want to be up there with those guys, I got to bring it more than I have been. The tweet by Perkins, I think, had something to do with it. And then I'm really happy to hear that Perkins and Jason Tatum had an actual conversation. So Tatum at 23 seems to be miles years more mature than Kevin Durant, who fights with everybody on Twitter, whether it be Michael Rappaport or Shannon Sharp. So give Tatum a lot of credit for actually talking to Perk, who I think Kendrick Perkins has a lot of juice in that organization and throughout the league. I think a lot of that all together, maybe he's feeling healthier. I know he's talked about that. He's been dealing with the after effects of COVID. That could be the case. If you do remember, Jet, right around, it wasn't this same time last year, because of course we were in a shutdown because of the pandemic, but about 50 games into the season is where he really took off last year. Remember how great he was in February?
Yeah, right after he got named into the All-Star team.
It seems to be the same number of games in. Maybe this is where he really picks it up throughout his career. Who knows? I mean, it's a short sample. It's only his 4th year. But he has elevated his game. He's making other guys better, which is still the truest mark of a superstar, not just the star. Look, that was just a fantastic game on Saturday night. I mean, Curry is otherworldly. He was 15 of 27 from the floor, but he was 11 of 19 from 3. That doesn't even seem real. I mean, to go 57% from 3 is one thing.
One of them was like a hook shot, Sap, like falling away.
Yeah, it was a 4-point play, and then you're talking about 57% on 19 attempts. It's not like he was 4 of 7. He was 11 of 19. The guy's incredible. He's the greatest shooter ever. I'll debate that with anyone. And I think he's changed the game more than any player in my lifetime in terms of how the game's played on the court. Jordan made the game grow, made it global. LeBron made it mobile. Players now are free to leave to multiple teams. But Steph Curry's had such an incredible impact because not that you can become a shooter like Steph Curry, but what's Steph Curry, 6'3", 185? He looks like a normal guy. If you see him on the street, he looks small on an NBA court, but he's so damn good that he dominates even at that size. So kids love him. The women love him. WNBA players love him. Girls in high school and college love him. He's sensational. He really is. And you mentioned about Steph Curry not missing many games. I believe this year they're 1-7 in the 8 games he's missed. So he's only missed 8 games, and they're 1-7. So that shows you how valuable he is to his team. He's not going to win the MVP because, quite frankly, the Golden State Warriors are 1 game under 500 right now. You're not going to get an MVP from a team that's barely in playoff contention. But that was such a fun game to watch those 2 stars going at it, and give Tatum credit. He went mano a mano against one of the best players in the history of the sport, and his team won. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, he really dragged the Celtics just as Curry was trying to drag the Warriors. The Warriors went on a little run early in the game, and Tatum was the sole reason it didn't get completely out of control. And that's what you'd like to see from star players is Tatum, I think, has been criticized fairly for taking quarters or halves off. And when you're a star player, you can't really do that. And he didn't on Saturday. And that's why the Celtics won, is because he played 4 strong quarters. Yeah, but like you said, no, Curry's remarkable. He is. And you said he's not going to win the MVP, but is he a legitimate MVP candidate in your mind, Sap?
Well, his numbers this year are eerily as good as they were in the 2015-16 season when he won the MVP unanimously. Now, the difference is that Golden State team was 73-9 on their way to losing to LeBron James in Cleveland in the finals. This team is 1 game under 500. Here's the difference. This year, Steph's averaging 31 a game. 5 years ago, he was averaging 30. Rebounds are close. Assists are close. This year, he's shooting 43% from 3. Back in 15-16, he was shooting 45% from 3. I mean, his year is very similar to 2015-2016 when he became the only unanimous MVP in league history, which there should have been other ones that had done that. I'm sure Michael Jordan and LeBron had MVP years where, like, why did anybody else garner a vote? I mean, those guys were clearly the MVPs, but Steph was the unanimous winner in 2015-2016. He's playing like an MVP. The problem is, so are 12 other guys who have better records than Steph Curry.
Yeah, that's true. It's been a competitive year, and guys, even the guys who have missed time, like Embiid, is still going to get votes. LeBron's still going to get votes, and their teams are going to have significantly better records than Golden State. I mean, he's had to do heavy lifting this year. Draymond Green is not the Draymond Green you're used to. Nope. James Wiseman, is a rookie, and now he's out for the rest of the year. So it's not like you could have expected him to contribute that much. Wiggins, there's a reason why when we did this exercise about the redrafting that 2014 year sap that I didn't have him very high. He's just not consistent enough for me. And I thought he played fine on Saturday. He just like he disappears for stretches of games, just like offensively, just completely disappears. So yeah, Curry's had to do a lot of lifting, and I think he'll probably end up finishing top 5 in MVP voting,
He
fifth.
may. Yeah, because
Uh,
again, if they get into the playoffs or at least into the play-in, and again 1-7 without him and above 500 with him, that's enough to vault him in there. He'll probably be first team All NBA. I would say that Steph Curry and Luka would be your backcourt, although Dame Lillard can make a valid case for being that guy. Harden's kind of out of the running a little bit because he's missing time now. So yeah, he could be top 5, top 8 in that area. It's the deepest MVP class I can ever remember.
Yeah,
Right?
I would. I mean, I'd certainly put Jokic at 1 right
He's
now.
number
It
one.
seems like everybody. I'm trying to think. Who I'd put. I'd put Embiid ahead of him too, ahead of
Oh yeah.
Curry. I'd put. It depends when LeBron comes back. I guess it depends how many games LeBron ends up missing, right? Depending on where he's going to finish in the MVP standing.
Right, because LeBron's missed 15 games. Let's say he misses another 5, so that means he misses 20 out of 72. Embiid's going to be right around there, but Embiid, has been so dominant this year. I think it's Jokic 1, Embiid 2, and then after that, you can probably put 10 different guys.
Yeah,
that
you can make a
fit into
case for a
3, 4,
bunch.
5. Giannis has had a great year.
Yeah,
Milwaukee's
Dame,
playing
as you
pretty well.
mentioned.
Dame's up there. Luka got closer about a month ago. The Mavericks are kind of playing mediocre basketball right now, and so is he.
Chris Paul's going to get votes too.
Chris Paul's going to get votes on the old style of being a leader, because he's taken a Phoenix team that wasn't even in the postseason last year, and they're right on the heels of Utah for the best record in basketball. That means something. Again, value the regular season. I don't think anybody takes Utah or Phoenix seriously, but they're fighting out for the best record in the league this year. So, good for them. Yeah, he'll get some votes. LeBron, of course, will get votes. In terms of Brooklyn, I mean, Durant just missed way too many games, and Harden now is missing games, and Kyrie, he'll probably be second team All NBA, maybe third team All NBA. But yeah, you've got 7, 8, 9 legitimate candidates there, and I think Steph's in that second tier. I think it's Jokic's to lose, and if Embiid really finishes with a strong kick and doesn't miss any more games, he'll play 75% of the 76ers games. He's been so damn dominant that he'll get a lot of votes as well.
Yeah, Curry, it's a tough year, and it's going to come down to the fact that, listen, when they're with him, they're a competent team. Without him, they're a horrible team.
Yep.
It's just they're not good enough when they're with him. He makes them at least competitive every time he plays, versus when he doesn't, they'll get steamrolled. But it's being competitive and just okay isn't good enough to win the MVP award.
No.
Especially when you got all these guys who are everybody we were talking about. Their teams are not just in the playoffs, but firmly entrenched in the playoffs. The Lakers are firmly entrenched. The Nuggets are firmly entrenched. The Blazers are firmly entrenched. The Suns, as you mentioned, might finish with the best record in basketball. And the Sixers have the best record in the East. So that's a lot to ask to overcome that when your team is right on the verge of that play-in thing, to, even if you have great numbers, to vault over guys who also have great numbers and whose teams are significantly better than yours.
Yeah, Steph is with Golden State. They're 1-7 without him, 27-22 with him. That's a huge difference. And again, I think I'm a bigger Steph fan than you are. You love Steph, but I really love him.
He annoys me.
I like the showmanship. I like the style he plays with, the flair. I don't think it's very harmful. Like, I guess if you're playing against him, you might get pissed off as he hits a 37-footer in your face, and then he wiggles down the court or whatever. But I love the flair that he plays with, that enthusiasm. I think he's a great leader. I mean, when Durant went there, of course, it's very easy to have Durant, Steph, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Andre Iguodala, and all of those guys. Yeah, you should win the championship. But he's got the ability to know that, okay, Durant now becomes our primary scorer, at least in big situations. I'm secure enough to get the hell out of the way. I also think you watch him, and you saw this on Saturday night, he gets double teamed 35 feet away from the basket.
Yeah, you have to.
You have to, because he's already within shooting range. So how many times you see Golden State basically playing 4-on-3? That is a huge advantage. He's like a great deep threat in the NFL that takes, the corner and the safety with him, and now someone else gets open. That's the type of impact he has on the game. I have him as the 17th greatest player in the history of the sport, which is saying a lot because I only have 3 active players in my top 20. I got LeBron at number 1. I got Kevin Durant at 16. I got Steph at 17. And I think he can go up the list. I mean, there's nothing that says that Steph Curry can't equal Jerry West's accomplishments. The difference between those two great players, West was a really good defender. Steph's not.
He's a piss poor defender. He's bad.
He is. He's bad. But you know what? People want to watch the guy because of what he does offensively. We can live with his defense when you're that damn good. And I tweeted out earlier today that the style that he plays with, if Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes had a baby together, which, we know is not possible, but if they had a baby together and their offspring decided to play basketball instead of football, it'd be Steph Curry, because he's got a little bit of both of those guys. He's the greatest shooter we've ever seen. The release is ridiculous. It's like he doesn't even touch the ball. So all of that applies. And again, he'll piss some people off because he also, the media loves him too, right? I mean, maybe more so than any player other than LeBron. They love him, but he's an accommodating guy with the media. He seems like he's a decent enough guy, nice family, cute kids, all of that fun stuff.
Well, what bothers me about him is, I love defensive players, and he's not a great defensive player by any metric. The showboating, listen, if he's on your team, you love the showboating. If he's not, you hate it. What I don't like is that it's the NBA of the 2020s where, he's showboating. He's throwing up 3 fingers. He's doing the hang glide or whatever, that he doesn't get, that nobody has ever just trucked him on a 3-point attempt. I would love to see somebody just foul him really hard one time and see how that goes.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, if this was the 1990s, even more so than the 80s, because the 90s was by far the most physical decade ever. I added another vowel or two in there. That's
fine.
Yeah, add another consonant.
For emphasis.
Yeah, exactly. Most physical decade ever was definitely the 90s. Yeah, someone would have charged into him at some point. I mean, whether it be, I could picture Gary Payton covering Steph Curry. That could have got physical at some point.
He's, to me, he's the scariest offensive player I've ever seen in terms of when you're rooting against him. Every shot he takes, you think is going to go in from anywhere on the court.
More than Durant?
Yeah, Curry scares the crap out of me more than Durant.
I mean, Durant has more ways
I'm not saying he's more talented than Durant. No. I'm saying it just, every time he shoots, I think it's going to go in wherever he takes it from.
Yeah, from the bench, from the parking lot. You're right. I mean, he had a left-handed semi-hook as he got fouled on Saturday night. Went in, and you know what? Were you surprised when that went in? No, I wasn't surprised. He's that good.
No, he scares, every time he shoots, he scares the crap out of you because you think it's just nothing but net from wherever he takes it on the court. And him and Dame Lillard are the 2 most confident shooters I've ever seen in my life. I mean, literally, they think every shot they take from full court to right under the basket is swish.
As they should, right? And I'm sure Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, every time they throw a football, they expect it to be completed for a touchdown. When you're that good, you expect that. So you need that confidence to play at that level. That was just such a fascinating game. It was so fun. You had, the ABC's #1 crew there with Green, Jackson, and Van Gundy. It felt really good. It felt like a playoff game. And that, again, goes back to my original point. Let's make the regular season mean something, because that game meant something.
Yeah, it was a fun competitive game. And Sep, you talked about how we got a couple other good games. One of them was the Knicks Pelicans, which in past years would have been reduced to an NBA TV game. Instead, it was a national televised game. If you don't have that extra cable package of NBA TV. What I thought was the bigger story was what happened after the game, and this sent Twitter into a freaking tizzy. A tizzy. That's an old-fashioned word, right?
That's a good word. I like that.
Thank you. Zion Williamson, who, as you've said before, has such a great personality, is always smiling, just seems to genuinely love playing basketball, whereas some of his contemporaries in New York on that Brooklyn team seem to genuinely hate playing basketball, but just happen to be really good at it.
They're annoyed by it sometimes, right?
Yeah.
They're like, we got to play tonight. Like, I'd rather do something else. Zion is a baller.
And so Zion, again, sent Twitter and social media into a tizzy by talking about how much he loves playing in Madison Square Garden. He said it's his favorite place to play. New Orleans first, because you can't piss off the home fans. So New Orleans number one, but Madison Square Garden, he just was beaming ear to ear talking about it, saying it's just different playing here. It's really, whether they're rooting for you or against you, it's a different feeling. I mean, he was like just raving. It was like somebody describing their girlfriend if she's a supermodel, talking about playing in Madison Square Garden. And so naturally the discussion went to, okay, well, when is Zion headed to the New York Knicks?
That would be certainly interesting. I'm sure the league would like that to make the Knicks even more relevant. And look, the Knicks have been a surprise this year. They're currently 6th in the Eastern Conference. Looks like they're going to make the playoffs. I think they'll be a tough out in terms of, they'll probably lose in the first round, maybe in 5 games, but they'll battle you for those 5 games. Julius Randle is probably going to win Most Improved Player this year. He's playing like an all NBA caliber player.
Yeah, he deserves it.
Nice to see Derrick Rose back out there, busting his ass and getting results as well. And Tom Thibodeau, is a hard-ass coach, and it seems to be working. Stan Van Gundy tries to be a hard-ass coach, and it's not working in New Orleans. I think Thibodeau has more cachet than Stan Van Gundy. And I said this from the get-go. Why the hell did New Orleans hire that guy to coach a really talented
They should have hired a young
team?
guy. Yeah, young coach.
A young player who played in the league, not a guy who looks like a butcher. I mean, I look at Stan Van
He does
Gundy
look
and just
like a
think,
butcher.
like a butcher. I mean, he looks like Ron Jeremy
does.
too. Of course, the porno star. May he rest in peace. He had a fun life, to say the least. But yeah, he doesn't look like an NBA coach. He's got this kind of seedy looking mustache. He's like dumpy looking, and like they've really taken him seriously. So get a young coach. They had Alvin Gentry there, who I thought was doing a nice job with them. He's a veteran coach, kind of like a father figure. I think Alvin Gentry would be doing better with this team than Stan Van Gundy. Look, Zion plays in New Orleans, loves New York. I think the connection there is he really knows where the 2 best restaurant cities in America are, New Orleans and New York, and Zion likes to eat. He's a big fella, 6'7", 285. Yeah, the league would love that. I mean, in a sense, though, Jet, you can have great players playing in outposts. New Orleans is not a great basketball town.
No.
It's a football town. LeBron James played 11 years in Cleveland. Is he got more cachet now because he went to the Lakers? No. Durant and Westbrook were megastars in Oklahoma City, of all places. It's not the 1980s where let's get the Knicks, the Bulls, the Lakers, the Celtics, the Sixers. Let's make sure those teams are really good because those are huge markets. Now it really doesn't matter where you play. But since New York is such a great basketball city, yeah, that would be fascinating to see. And you know what? Zion may say after a certain number of time, at a certain period of time, where am I? I've got this guy, Stan Van Gundy, who's just yelling incessantly for no apparent reason. He threw his team under the bus after the game, too. I mean, because Bullock hit a 3 to tie the game for the Knicks, and Lonzo Ball had kind of left Bullock in the corner to go after Derrick Rose, who drove to the basket. A 2 wasn't going to beat you. A 3 tied you. And, he threw his team under the bus. That's maybe not necessarily the best way to handle younger players. Zion might say, look, I'm going to go to a bigger market. He's got a huge sneaker deal. So I'm sure, he's with Nike, right? I'm assuming.
Yes.
I mean, Nike would probably love to see him in New York. There's just more eyeballs there than there are in New Orleans. But, yeah, it food for thought. And look, the Knicks have been irrelevant for a long time. He'd make them relevant, that's for sure.
Yeah, everybody thinks that the Knicks have been thinking the next great star was going to come and sign with them for the last 20 years, and it hasn't happened.
Yep.
Zion obviously would be that, but it's, in looking at how these rookie contract extensions have gone, nobody's ever in the history of the league turned down a max extension off a rookie deal, because it's the first time. Somebody put this well on NBC Sports. You go from being rich to generational wealth once you sign that first maximum contract extension, and you talk about hundreds of millions of dollars as opposed to tens of millions of dollars. Once you sign that first $100+ million contract, that's that max extension off a rookie deal, you set up your kids and grandkids for life.
The only difference with Zion, he makes so much money through his sneaker deal with Nike that he might be the outlier who can say, look, after 4 years, he'll then be a restricted free agent. maybe he looks to go to New York, won't make as much money as he would if he re-signed with New Orleans. Am I getting all that right? Because you're the cap
Yeah.
expert in the NBA. Then he can make that up in sneaker money and other endorsements. How big would he be in New York?
No, he'd be
You know,
massive. But if he's restricted, Sap, they can, they can match it. So he would
they
have no
can match
choice.
it. Yeah. So that's the part that throws a wrench into this potential thing. Or at some point, does he say to New Orleans, "Look, I'm not staying here, so move me"? I mean, that's
No,
something
that's
that
the
happens
Anthony
in the
Davis
NBA.
route.
Yeah, which it took him a little bit longer
7 years,
do
I
that.
think.
7 years, and Zion maybe does it earlier. I don't know how long a career Zion's going to have. I worry about that because he's such a big guy and he's had injuries. And do you see Zion having as long a career as LeBron? I don't. I don't see many guys that are going to
Yeah,
have that long
nobody
a
does.
career. Yeah, he's
Kareem and
he's
Robert Parrish.
pretty much it. And here he is in year 17, and he's still, I forget how many years he's in the league now. 11 in Cleveland, 4 in Miami, and 3 in the Lakers. So that's 11 for this 18th year. He's in his 18th year, and he was the leading MVP candidate when he got hurt. You don't see that often. At least the Tom Brady of basketball, he just keeps showing up. So Zion's that big guy, and once he loses that explosiveness, he won't be quite the same player. Yeah, I could see him having a 12 to 14-year career, so maybe he wants to get the most out of it as possible.
Well, it does put the onus on New Orleans and to surround him with the right talent. And I think that was the problem with Anthony Davis, is that they never really gave him anything to play with. They gave him like Boogie Cousins for a year. So, New Orleans is going to have to take the long-term view at this and make sure we do everything we can to keep, Zion as happy as possible. So we're not facing a situation 5-6 years down the road where he's out of here. They don't want a repeat of what happened with Anthony Davis in New Orleans. They'd like to keep their, star generational player in Zion for his whole career if possible. So they're going to have to keep trying to make the right moves. And I agreed with you at the time. And I agree with you now. Stan Van Gundy wasn't a good choice. I didn't get it then. And it makes less sense now. I don't think he's going to be long for that job next year. If they start off slow, I could see him being fired early in the year. So we'll see what happens there. But I just thought it was interesting. And, New York fans get so excited about any sort of bright spot about their team because it's been all darkness for the better part of 30 years with the Knicks, more or less since Patrick Ewing left the team. It's been just terrible.
Jet, since 1999, they've advanced past the first round of the playoffs once. And that was in 2013 when they beat the Celtics in the first round of the playoffs. That's it. So if you're like a 28-year-old Knicks fan, you've seen one playoff series that they won. They made the finals, remember, in 99 as an 8 seed, and they ended up getting blown out by San Antonio.
Year.
Yeah, lockout year. Larry Johnson was playing with them, right? And I don't even think Ewing was there. He'd already moved on. So, yeah, they've been irrelevant for a long, long period of time. And look, they're still the highest valued franchise in the NBA. I mean, because the Knicks and Rangers, owned by Dolan, own Madison Square Garden. So that's going to pump the value up of their franchises. And it's still New York. They've got mega contracts with Madison Square Garden Network, which they own. So, yeah, they've got unlimited cash, but they can't seem to recruit the player. I thought in 2010 that they'd be more in play for LeBron James, but, the management team is a turnoff. Maybe now Leon Rose and Tom Thibodeau, you can start getting those types of players. And especially,
I think you're seeing that. Whispers
you're seeing
that's going to happen.
You got Julius Randle, and I think Derrick Rose is respected in the league, a guy who's come back from like a gazillion knee operations. So, yeah, maybe they've got something going there.
Yeah, you want a guy like Derrick Rose to say he had a good experience in New York and not come out of it to saying to other players, holy crap, this is a nightmare. The owner is a psychopath. I mean, he is.
Right.
But you want him saying it seems stable. And I think everybody would be surprised how quickly a stable Knicks franchise can actually attract free agents or attract people demanding to be traded to there. It's just they've been so comically poorly run for so long that nobody's wanted to go there. If they just had an inkling of direction or the owner stepping away, then I think that you've been seeing a team that has a lot more success. They've had an embarrassing run to the point where it defies logic that a team in New York could be this bad for this long.
Yeah, really bad, because they should have some built-in advantages that they don't take advantage of.
Yeah. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We are presented, as always, by Full Press Coverage. You can check out the podcast wherever podcasts are, on iTunes, on Spotify. You can see our faces and the YouTube version of it on youtube.com/JetStryer. Remember to give that a thumbs up and a like and comment. Always make sure to comment back. So check it out there. And we always tweet out the podcast links. Sap's Twitter is at JohnSap25. Mine is at JetStryer. So plenty of places to see us. No excuses not to listen or to watch. Thanks everybody for listening. And we'll be back tomorrow with another podcast. See you then.